Hello, my name is Ray Adams. I'm a chartered financial planner and I specialise in pension advice. Today I'm going to talk about the Tapered Annual Allowance and how it affects you in the NHS Pension Scheme. Well, the Tapered Annual Allowance was actually introduced in 2016 and the aim of that was to reduce the cost burden via tax relief for high earners. So what is a high earner? There are two limits in the Tapered Annual Allowance calculation. The first one is threshold income of £110,000 and the other is adjusted income of £150,000. So I'll try and do it very simply using some examples. If you are a consultant earning £100,000, you are clearly below the 110 threshold and you don't need to worry. If you're a consultant earning £120,000, then potentially you could be above the 110,000 threshold. You're thinking, why potentially? I'm obviously above it. Because threshold income includes all forms of income, such as rental income, investment income, basically anything which is taxable income, but less your personal pension contributions. So let's assume you're on £120,000 salary, no other forms of income, but you're in the NHS Pension Scheme and your personal pension contributions are 14.5% of that 120,000, which is 17,400. If you deduct that off, it comes down to 102,600. So your net threshold income is below the 110. You don't need to do the calculation. Great news. However, if you do have some other forms of income, such as rental income, or you do some private income, then that could potentially take you above the 110. And in fact, you may have heard some stories of people who do additional sessions to help clear the waiting lists, and that potentially then pushes them over the 110 and they need to do the calculation. So let's just actually take this on now and assume that your actual total income is £150,000, and after deducting personal pension contributions, you're down to £120,000. So that's your new net threshold income. You're clearly above the 110 and you have to do the calculation. What you now need to do is to find out what your total pension input has been for that year. That's your contributions and the employer's. Now, if you were in just a defined contribution pension scheme, it'd be fairly simple. It's a monetary amount which has been invested in a pension. However, if you're in a defined benefit pension scheme, such as the NHS, it's a little bit more complicated. And the easiest way to find out what your total pension input has been is to contact the pension department of the NHS, and they will be able to provide you with a breakdown of what the total pension input has been for this year, last year, the year before, etc. So you should be able to work it out. So if we stick to that example where you're on £120,000 threshold income after deducting your personal contributions, and then from the NHS you've been informed that your total input, employer and employee, was 40,000. You might think, well, that's great, I've not exceeded my allowance, my annual allowance. But you have to do this calculation because your base threshold income was 120 and your total pension contributions are 40. You combine them together and that's now at 160. That's above the adjusted threshold of 150,000. It's exceeded it by £10,000. You now have to taper your annual allowance from 40,000 and you lose it at the rate of 50p in the pound. So you're £10,000 above, 50p in the pound is 5,000. So in this particular example, you have to be tapered down by £5,000. So instead of £40,000 allowance, you're only allowed 35,000. We've established that you've already put 40 in this year, so you're £5,000 over, and that needs to be either declared on your next tax return and potentially pay tax at your marginal rate or use scheme pay, or what you may be able to do is to actually mop up some unused allowance from previous years, and you can go back 3 years. And of course, 3 years ago, you can go back 3 years as well. So it's always useful to get your total pension inputs for the last 6 or 7 years. And if you've got any unused relief from previous years, you can carry that forward and mop up that 5,000. So it might not all be as bad as you think. And what you probably need to do is to take some financial advice from a financial planner who specialises in the NHS pension. So where do you find this financial planner who specialises in the NHS? Well, the best way of doing it is a recommendation from one of your colleagues. So just speak to somebody you work with, find out if they've taken advice, and hopefully if they're happy with that, use that particular person. If you don't have that luxury, there are a few online directories that you can utilize. A very good one is advisorbook.co.uk, and there's also one called Unbiased or Vouched For, and they may be able to help you identify somebody local to you. Another way you can do it is if you go onto nhsemployers.org. I understand that there's a dedicated page for financial planners who've demonstrated knowledge in the NHS Pension Scheme. But that's not a definitive list because advisors have to put themselves forward to be put onto there. So again, the best one really is a recommendation if possible. Anyway, good luck for the future and thanks very much for listening.